Morning, friends. Okay, so the Comet Cleanser didn't stand up. Big surprise. After doing a little bit of research online, I found out, actually it wasn't online, I pulled out the big yellow book of knowledge on the Dodge. And after looking up the specs on the steering pump and the the steering pump pulley, there is a specified depth for it, and the pulley itself is supposed to be flush with the end of the shaft, plus or minus half a millimeter, depending on whether or not it's chirping. If it's chirping, you can go ahead and move the pulley back out half a millimeter. If it makes it worse, move it in a full millimeter. So that's kind of the headache that I've been dealing with. I went ahead and took a look at the steering pump that I'm using or had been using, and a while back, 2 years ago, when I first really started digging into this, I was having problems with the belt not staying in the grooves, and I got a tool and was able to go ahead and drive the pulley back a little bit further, but it stopped. And I went ahead and picked up another tool yesterday and tried to go ahead and drive it on even deeper this morning, and it will not go. And I'll show you what we're dealing with here in just a sec. All right, this is the pulley, or this is the pump assembly that was on Ethyl. I just took it off here about a half hour ago. And if you look right in here, this the end of this shaft, the rusty end of this shaft, should be flush with the flange on this pulley, and it's not. Probably a good 1/16 of an inch, maybe an 1/8, and trying to go ahead and drive this back on with the tool kit right here. I almost broke the tool and had to go ahead and take vice grips and some ugly nasty tools to go ahead and take this thing off, or to get the tool off, to try and get things taken apart. There was just no way that was going to go. Also, if you look right here, notice the gap in the between the back of the pulley and the bracket. Okay, when I first started messing around with this thing 2 years ago, back in the summer of 2018, the gap here was about 3/8 of an inch. Obviously, I've moved it back some, but it's supposed to be a lot closer. And I'll give you a reference here in just a sec. Okay, this is the spare pump and pulley assembly that I had on my shelf. It's kind of cruddy looking from sitting around. It wasn't cleaned up like the other one, but notice the gap here. Well, get that hose out of the way there. Okay, so notice the gap here. I went ahead and I measured that with a feeler gauge the other night. That's less than 1 millimeter. It's about 3/4 of a millimeter. If you look at the front of the pump, the end of the pump shaft is flush with the pulley. That's how the other one is supposed to be. And for the life of me, I can't get it to drive on there. You can't whack it with a hammer. About the only other thing I could do would be to start over, take the thing off, maybe clean up the inside of the pulley a little bit. It's obviously a friction fit. I don't want to do that. It's not worth the headache. I'll clean this mess up, and I'm going to put this on. I've already cannibalized the high pressure hose and swapped it over, and I'm going to go down to the parts store here a little bit, get the low pressure return line, but I'm willing to bet this cures my squeak. Let's put it this way, it's either going to cure my squeak or it's going to make it worse. Looking down the length of the belt as it runs across the pulleys, visually you can't see it. I mean, the difference is that small over that length. You're just not going to go ahead and see it, or at least I wasn't seeing it, but you can definitely hear it with the chirp. Now, I have not run this pump. This was off of the junked out donor motor that came with the donor Dodge that set with water in the cylinders for probably 2 or 3 years. The cylinder walls had scaled up on one cylinder, and the block was junk. I mean, I could have gone ahead, well, what I did do is go out and get another motor for $400, and that's the motor that's in Ethyl now. The only thing I did with that was change the cam and change the valve springs. so everything else on that's bone stock from a 99. Yeah, removing the pump itself was no big deal. You take the belt loose, remove 4 bolts, and the pump assembly and the bracket comes out. I'd already gone ahead and broke loose the high pressure hose down at the gearbox, and it was easier to go ahead and break the high pressure hose loose at the back of the pump once the box was off. Not quite as messy as I was anticipating it being, but either way, it's not clean work, it's just work. All right, this little guy right here is the tool that's supposed to go ahead and push that pulley back on. And you can see the corners of the nut that drive this press back onto, or drive that press up against the pulley. It's supposed to push the pulley on. Eventually they started to round, and at that point I was done. I wasn't going to go ahead and take any more chances. The pulley wasn't going anywhere. When I did go ahead and start the engine up, after trying to go ahead and push it on there, there was no noticeable change. And again, we're talking about a 0.5 millimeter plus or minus. And so if it was moving any, it should have made some change, but it didn't. And for those of you saying, well, hey, why didn't you just heat that pulley up and it would have dropped right on there? No, not so much. I went ahead and took the propane torch to it for a while, just around the pulley itself, where it attaches to the, or where it presses onto the shaft, and yeah, I wasn't going to go. Again, I heated it, then I went ahead and took the tool to it, and even still, after heating it up, it wasn't about to happen. I guess in the bigger scheme of things, if I really wanted to, if I was really attached to that pump, I could go ahead and heat the pulley, or take the pulley off, heat it up separate from the shaft, and then try and go ahead and slip it on there. Again, you're still dealing with the same friction fit or interference fit, and this one, for whatever reason, just doesn't want to go full depth. I don't know why. The only thing I can figure is that there's some corrosion on that shaft that's keeping it from moving any further. So it's not a big deal, it's just an annoyance. But once I go ahead and get the low pressure return hose, I'll get that put on the pump, and then I'll go ahead and put the pump back on the motor, and we'll see where we stand. I think I'll probably be a little bit easier to move the pulley off of the old pump a millimeter if I had to than it is going to be to go ahead and try and push this other one back any further. Okay, no more voodoo magic, no more cleanser, baby powder, or whatever the hell. I went ahead and got the old pump that I had on the shelf cleaned up. I went ahead and put new hoses on it, and I've got it installed on the motor now. I just finished topping off the reservoir, so let's see what it sounds like. Okay, here's everything installed. Again, it's all nice and cleaned up now. All the lines are plumbed back in. Everything's hooked up like it should be. And I'm going to turn the key and see what we do. No more squeak, no more chirp, no more drama. You know, for all the headache that I put into this, trying to go ahead and get this silliness sorted out with the other pump, I think this is a much better way to go. I don't regret this one bit. This was well worth it. And just a bit more proof. No voodoo magic, just a straight install with a properly aligned pulley. That's all it took. So there we have it. It's all fixed up. Ethyl no longer squeaks, no longer chirps. No need to swap belts around and cross my fingers and put powder on the pulleys and all that other silliness. None of it was required. It just just need a properly aligned pulley on the pump. And I guess I'm going to go ahead and take the other pump and put it back on the shelf, save it for future reference just in case. If I have to, I can go ahead and take that pulley back off and try and reset it and hopefully get it properly aligned. At least now I know what I'm looking for and how it's supposed to be. So there we go. Otherwise, if somebody needs a Chrysler power steering pump, I've got one. A little bit of work on your own required though. Y'all have a good afternoon. Shade Tree Joe is done in the shade. I'm sweating, I'm done. And one last thing, truth in advertising, full disclosure, credit where credit is due. I've got to give credit to the fine folks on ADV Rider, especially a gentleman who goes by Yamarocket 630. He's been kind of my go-to guru for this Dodge stuff, and he's the one that pointed out that the alignment on the serpentine belt system is controlled by the power steering pump. With that information, I went ahead and I looked at the Big Yellow Book of Knowledge, the Chrysler Factory Service Manual for the Dodge trucks, and sure enough, that's where I found that the pulley was supposed to go ahead and be flush with the end of the shaft. And true to form, I went ahead and swapped the pump assembly out for one that's got the pulley flush with the end of the shaft. No more squeaks, no more chirps, no leaks, no problem, no drama. So thank you again. I appreciate all your help.